Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy Hour.
Happy hour.
We fucked that up so bad.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristoff.
I'm Anna Muskie-Goldwyn.
And gang, for those of you watching, I am in a little bit of a new...
It's very moody.
A new background right now, new studio. I've moved my computer into my bungalow. I'm getting kicked out of my office because they're turning my garage into an ADU, which is going to be 6 months of construction nightmare going on.
Oh, God.
So, future episodes, be warned. You
So
might
in the
hear
meantime,
some hammering.
You're like living in Mad Men, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Is the vibe
exactly.
I'm getting.
And I'm holding my microphone like a Gen Z.
Totally. You might as well just like
podcaster.
go sit on your couch and just lay
Honestly,
down and like recline.
Well, I didn't know that was an option.
Like, sure, next time.
I love
maybe
that
we should,
idea.
Maybe we should switch the podcast so we all just lay on our couches.
You know, you might actually have a great idea.
We're going to put up
Anna.
a poll and make sure you vote
Yeah.
if you want to see us all just record our podcasts from our couches every week.
I
Maybe
feel
that's
like
the new
this
vibe.
maybe be a new vibe. I like it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's like armchair politics.
The only
Like-
problem is I do feel like we're all going to have like a double chin. And so we're going to have to sort out like our posture on the couch.
Yeah, we'll figure it out because you're right. The film shooting 101 is that nobody looks
Don't
good
sit on
sitting
a
on a
couch.
couch. Yeah, exactly. So, playlisters, we have a really, really great episode coming to you here. We are going to sit down a little bit later with Congressman Gabe Amo of Rhode Island. Anna, you have been to Rhode Island, I think, right?
Rhode Island is a very special place in my heart. He's the
Yeah.
2 out of 2 congressmen of Rhode Island that we have now interviewed with him and Seth
I love it.
Magaziner. So we've covered all the Rhode Island bases. Tiny state.
I love it.
They've only
I
got
love
2.
it.
So
Yeah, 49 left to go. Here we go. Well, obviously, like yet another wild news week here. The hits keep coming.
oh yeah.
We don't even have time to talk about the New York Times reporting of Trump making 1.5 billion in grift since he's re-entered
We'll
the White
do
House.
like an Instagram video about it or something.
I know, like ICE stuff is still crazy. They're now sending like investigations of the Minnesota leadership. But we thought it would be fun to, in honor of winter.
Is fun the right word?
Yeah, I guess we, out of all the headache-inducing headlines we could discuss, I think it feels appropriate. We're talking about money and green, and so it's cold. So let's turn our attention
talk
to
about
Greenland.
Yeah. Well,
What's going on here?
Yes, we're going to talk about Greenland, but I want to talk more specifically about the breaking of the current world order, just as, a small little topic before we get to our interview with Rep. Amo. So as of today, January 21st, 2026, the United States is no longer the assumed leader of the free world.
Whoa.
So
Wow.
our closest allies, if we can even call them that anymore, declared yesterday in Davos, Switzerland at that big annual summit of the global elites that because of Trump's recklessness and this bizarre push to, quote, own Greenland, that the U.S. essentially can no longer be trusted as a global leader. And I thought I would read off some of the commentary from various leaders and allies, former allies, at the summit. So the Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever said to his European cohorts regarding Greenland, quote, "If you back down now, you will lose your dignity." So essentially trying to rally Europe as one. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called for a, quote, permanent independence from the US and not to wait for a potential post-Trump return to normal. I thought that was quite notable.
Wow.
French President Emmanuel Macron said Trump's tariff threats to European countries over his desire for Greenland were, quote, fundamentally unacceptable, especially when used, quote, as leverage against territorial sovereignty. And then to cap it all off, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said, quote, "We knew the story of international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient." And he said that the bargain that America's outsized power was acceptable, quote, no longer works. So clearly, Trump's push for wanting to acquire Greenland has crossed a red line for Europeans and Canada for the first time, really, in post war history. And it seems that they being these former allies, are hoping that if they present a united front, they may actually have the power to push back against the Trump administration. And this all comes as European military is already deploying to Greenland, and the island's prime minister has told his people to prepare themselves for an invasion.
Wow.
So that's a rundown of where we're at.
This is just so. I mean, I guess the technical term would be fucking insane that the world and this NATO alliance that we built and engineered in the wake of World War II is now actually having real conversations about, okay, what does it look like if the U.S. military just starts to invade Greenland, which, by the way, houses several military bases and facilities.
Right, like we already
so
have
it's not like
power there.
we don't have access to Greenland.
That's what I think is so frustrating and backwards about the whole rhetoric of like, we need control because we're the only military that can defend it from Russia or China if they try to get into Greenland as like a strategic base. And it's
Guess
like,
what? We're already there.
Yeah, we're already there. And by the way, like Denmark wants us to be there, and everything has been going fine. And Russia is not trying to get Greenland. Like this is all. I saw something that Scott Bessent, like who is just so terrible at media,
so terrible. Can we let's just take a sec to talk about how bad.
Did you see the thing today where he was talking about how they want to go after like big landlords and not like mom and pop landlords, and he's like, like when your parents retire and they buy like 10 or 20 homes, and then that it's like who is buying 10 or 20 homes regularly as a retirement investment?
Classic average Joe filling the Trump administration.
But he had this like fumbled answer when they were talking about what is the emergency that warrants this, sudden need to take over Greenland. And he was like, well, the emergency is avoiding an emergency. And it's like, that is not an emergency. Like that's literally just a hypothetical. And something I came across that was interesting is that Macron said that the European bloc should not hesitate to deploy something that is called its anti-coercion instrument. And so this is a trade tool that the European Union has. And because all of this now is, I should just take a step back. This is all in response to Trump saying that he's going to impose tariffs on these European countries unless they let him just go into Greenland. So now all the European countries are basically saying, okay, this is now like a trade war that we're involved in. And Macron is calling on this thing called the anti-coercion instrument, which is a trade tool that was originally designed to counter China's economic pressure on Europe. So if we put two and two together here, essentially our allies are now viewing us as dangerous as they view one of their and our most definitive adversaries, which is China. So we are now in the same category in the eyes of the European Union as China. And that is wild.
Wild. And I think what is even more wild and notable is really the deafening silence that is coming from the Republican side of things. And, we've seen a few of these folks go out there. Like I saw Ted Cruz was on Fox News and was talking about how, America has a long history of colonizing and taking over land, which seems like an insane rationale to be making.
Also, is he saying that as like, yeah, we've done this before, it's no big deal?
Right. Yeah.
I feel
unclear.
I do feel that like the colonization efforts of America are not looked well upon in the history books.
But, I think what I just can't seem to wrap my head around here is how all of these very traditional conservatives who are all very pro-military, very conservative when it comes to our foreign policy, but also very hawkish in a way in terms of knowing who our traditional bad guys are, like Russia, like China, like Iran. And they have one of the things that I think has been so notable in all of the stuff with Russia and Ukraine is just how many Republican senators and congressmen and women have really pushed Trump and the administration to see the benefits and also the imperative need to defend Ukraine and
Mhm.
stand up against Russia. And I think that what we're seeing here is this decimation of our closest allies, as you pointed out. And it continues to give fuel to this theory that a lot of people have written about, which is this Trump administration seems to be recarving and redistributing the world order in these three sections.
Mhm.
The United States takes one hemisphere, which now may include Greenland, at the expense of our all of our European allies, who they seem to sort of be leaving up Eastern Europe and maybe beyond to Russia. And then, of course, China and the Southern South Pacific hemisphere. So it really lends credence to that, and I think that a lot of people feel like that notion of, well, redistributing world power is maybe not a bad thing, or why does that affect me, or who cares, when I'm struggling to pay groceries and healthcare, and all of that is like very viable arguments in terms of why it's important to really have a robust domestic policy. But I
Mhm.
think the thing that is lost in that conversation is actually how imperative and how strong of a domestic policy we can write when we actually are writing the global rule book from that position of power and leadership.
Well, I would actually like ground that a step further, which is we are now inevitably probably entering a trade war with our historically closest allies in Europe.
Right.
And so if people want to say very, with a lot of validity that, well, he can do whatever he wants with Greenland because like we just need to make sure that our economy at home is on track and I want to be able to afford my groceries and childcare and whatever.
Right.
Um, a lot of that stuff is because of trade with Europe. Like
Right.
our ability to be a lean trading partner that creates some sort of affordable goods. It's not just China that we get affordable goods from. It's also Europe. And there's a lot of food trade that happens with Europe. So let's talk about farmers. And
Right.
I think that what it is going to show, I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going to happen with this. I think that it's literally anything could happen.
Yeah,
But
I really don't know either.
whatever does happen, like I will tell you that the stock market dropped like 500 points today because
Try 800.
800
Yeah.
because investors in the stock market understand
Right.
that a trade war with Europe is not good for the American economy. And that doesn't matter if you have only like a minority percentage of Americans have investments in the stock market, but the stock
Right.
market can be an indicator of, what could happen if X happened. And if X happened, which is this trade war with Europe, I think it's safe to say that things would get more expensive. We would have to completely reroute the American economy that we've relied on since the 1940s.
Right.
And now we're looking at also potential militarization, which is another
Right.
element of economic strain, not to mention cultural and personal strain. So I think that this whole thing is you can kind of laugh at it, but at the same time, I think that what has happened in Davos this week is really startling. And I don't know, like for me as an American, the first thought I had is I was like, wow, is there a future where we're going to have to acquire travel visas to go to America, to go to Europe, just
Hmm.
like people from certain war-torn countries or Middle Eastern countries have to acquire travel visas to come to America because of
Yeah.
past foreign events. And that, like, I don't think we're there yet, but maybe, because if we're not seen as that direct of an ally, who knows?
Yeah.
And that's a small thing, but just think about that. Like if you ever have traveled to Europe, it's easy as an American. You just go because
Yeah.
there's an exchange of culture and ideas and a shared history globally and economically. And it seems that that is eroding. Not to mention Canada, which is, of course, our neighbor, and what happens when that relationship completely goes away. So,
I was struck by, to echo your point, there was Howard Lutnick, who remains really, from everybody I talk to who is involved in finance and works on Wall Street and in that world, they say that he really is the dumbest, most incompetent billionaire that we have, which, listen, I mean, obviously
There's a lot of them, so.
it's some sort of achievement to become a billionaire. I grant you, but really, I've never heard anyone who has a good opinion of Howard Lutnick. And he was out there on stage in Davos today, bumbling and stumbling his way through about how American leadership is great and we need strong America. And they kept saying, "So, but what about Greenland?" And he was like, "Well, I'm going to leave that to the national security people to talk to." And the look on the faces of everybody on this panel and in the audience just, I thought, captured it all. And I thought it captured, I feel like I'm a meme right now in that like reacting face of both embarrassment, disbelief, and frankly, anger. Because I look at what's going on. I look at all this shit. This Greenland stuff is just one big distraction from the real shit that's going on at home. And I'm so angry because it just doesn't have to be this way.
Right. It just doesn't make sense.
And I feel like I'm in this crazy Twilight Zone loop of a conversation when I talk about politics with Republicans and particularly Trump supporters who continue to give this guy the benefit of the doubt, which I really just can't understand. And not to make this all about Trump, but he's kind of doing that for us. And, this idea that, oh, well, he probably has some great idea or master plan. Let's just see how it goes. And I feel like the let's just see how it goes has most of the time for most voters who gave it the let's just see how this goes vote has ended really badly, whether it's a totally different immigration policy that they didn't vote for, whether it's a totally different economic policy they didn't vote for, or whether it's a totally different foreign policy that they didn't vote for. And so the rug keeps getting pulled out from under so many of these people who continue to support Trump. And I just wonder at what point are people going to stop giving this guy the benefit of the doubt here? Because it seems like we've run that course before.
Well, I think a lot of that, to segue, depends on what happens in the opposition. And
yes.
Today we are speaking with one of those people in the opposition, and that is Representative Gabe Amo, the Michael mentioned before from Rhode Island. He is actually the first person of color to represent Rhode Island in Congress.
Wow.
He is a first-generation American. His mom was originally from Liberia, and his father was from Ghana. He has a really interesting educational history. He went to Moses Brown School, which is in Providence in his district, which is cute, and then Wheaton College. And then he actually studied at Oxford in public policy. And he worked in the Biden White House as the Deputy Director of Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. And we talk a little bit about what that role entailed. And spoiler alert, it entailed some really insane things, like having to be the person who was the first call from the administration after mass shootings happened to the jurisdictions where they happened. So not a fun job, but an interesting one. And then he
worked in the Obama administration.
He also worked in the Obama administration and under former Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo, who also served in Biden's cabinet, and on several Democratic campaigns before that. So he's 41 years old. Oh my God, don't quote me on it. Sorry, Rep. Amo.
I think 38.
38?
Yeah. I don't like it.
But what's cool, I mean, cool is maybe not the right word. What's interesting about this conversation is this is the first politician we've had the opportunity to speak with since all of this crazy shit has been unfolding in Minneapolis. And we really wanted to get the perspective of a Democrat in Congress who is fighting in opposition to all this stuff that's happening with ICE, and kind of try to push him to really understand what is the plan for Democrats with all of this? How much power do they have? Could they have if they win back either chamber in the midterms? Because that shit in Minneapolis is crazy, and he's on the front lines of trying to figure out what to do about it.
Well, on that note, let's hear from Representative Amo. Congressman Amo, it's great to have you on Political Playlist Happy Hour. Thanks for coming.
No, thanks for inviting me on. It's good to be with you, Michael, and Anna, and I look forward to chatting about all of the things that are happening because there's so much.
Yes.
What a year it has been. It feels like it's March, doesn't it? Like we've been through so much.
I mean, you can say that about the last 2 years, really. I feel like I've lived lifetimes, and I've frankly only been in Congress since November of 2023. And
Wow.
you can tell by the gray in my chin that I've aged quite a bit in that time.
It's okay. Some things get better with age,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, we call this a happy hour. I think there is enough in the news that would send us to be having cocktails at noon, which is when we're recording here. But we're on coffee right now.
Yeah, and it is dry January.
Right.
Michael's doing a damp January, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, Congressman, a good place for us to dive in is the thing that is just engulfing the news and everybody's social media right now. And that is everything that's happening with ICE agents in Minneapolis and frankly across the whole country. And you worked in the Biden administration as a principal liaison with local government and mayors and officials. And I'm curious your perspective here. It seems like we're seeing such a breakdown in communication between the federal level and the local level with respect to ICE and this process. And it seems really dangerous. Can you share your perspective on this with us?
Well, look, I take a step back and first and foremost and recognize that we have experienced the loss of life in Renee Nicole Good, someone who should be here today, right? This is not a death that was warranted. It was prompted by lawlessness from ICE as an agency, by actions, practices, and procedures that somehow create this fake federal immunity that allows murder in our streets. And murder is defined as unlawful killing. I don't know how this comports with any version of the law. And so there should be sadness about what the loss of life has meant. And it hasn't just been in this circumstance. There have been shootings that have been, ICE officer driven that are unwarranted. Now, the question is, from a public policy matter and from the seat of an elected official, what do we do to respond?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where our focus has got to be in Congress. That's why this week I called for the impeachment of Kristi Noem. She doesn't deserve the job. She is frankly not a leader who is, providing any real operational value. She's carrying out instructions from Stephen Miller, who, might be the real vice president of the United States with the power that he wields. She's got to go. And I think it starts from the top, but let's be clear, it goes throughout all of the activities of ICE agents. We also have put forward inquiries about the hiring practices of these ICE officers, right? They're offering crazy bonuses. They are trying to poach other law enforcement. They're also lowering the qualifications. There was an article I read yesterday about them using the words AI to screen resumes and applications. And so if it said officer, it moved you to the top of the pool. But what if it meant compliance officer? It could be any officer, right? And they want as many bodies on the streets as possible to carry out their reign of terror. And the third thing that we have fought against and will continue to fight against is the plus up of hundreds of billions of dollars to the ICE effort. And specifically in the big ugly law, the HR 1, that dastardly bill that chopped the tax bill for the billionaires and increased it for regular folks. They funded ICE at a higher level at a much higher level to carry out their activities. Right. Look, we can believe in immigration enforcement and addressing problems while at the same time having a humane, reasonable, due process, order-based system. With all of this money that they took out of our healthcare system, $1 trillion, they took a whole bunch of cuts to people's healthcare this year. We're going to start to experience it so that they could fund people to ruin the lives of millions of Americans. And I say Americans because we know Miss Good as a U.S. citizen. This is terror in a lot of different areas. So I know I ran on a while there, but this is it's so distressing, right?
Yeah.
I talk to so many of my constituents, the people I work for, and all they say is how this breaks their heart. And their hearts are broken because if you are a person who believes in the fundamental good that exists in the world and that exists in people, and you hear the stories of people who have been playing by the rules, who may have not, solved some issue in their immigration process, will all of a sudden get alerted that they are, going to be deported, when you see families disrupted, when you see the next generation of children who are in our schools who are American citizens, and seeing the disruption in their lives, it makes your heart break because we have always been a beacon of hope. That's what our country is. And so right now, that light, that beacon gets a little bit dimmer.
So I want to ask you, you mentioned sort of all of the impeachment or, proposition to impeach Secretary Noem, this idea of focusing on the funding of ICE, all the things that you as Democrats are doing right now within the limited capacity you have as the minority. The cynical question I have is like, how, and mainly if these inquiries that you said, you're putting inquiries into like the training and stuff in this environment, how much information can you guys actually get, or how much confidence do you have that any of these things will actually have an impact? And even if they don't, why are they important to do?
Yeah, look, I think we're going to have to put our best effort forward and know that the disruption, the non-compliance, and the straight rejection of norms from both the Trump White House and our Republican colleagues in Congress who refuse to hold the executive branch accountable may impede our efforts. However, we got to keep doing it, right? Like we are sent here to work. And so the fact is, we have, some public pressure to continue to exert. You have seen mass movement around this country. Over the last weekend, there were protests and organizing all over. That's got to keep going. We also have to go to the courts. The courts have actually been an area of great success for Democrats, because frankly, lawyers know that there are consequences for lying in court, will actually reveal more. So we have to find areas to push things into the judicial arena, of course. And then we should find the levers that we have available to us. As you know, we're in the minority. It's a terrible place to be, especially when there's an abdication of the roles, the responsibility of the whole branch of government from our colleagues. However, something that we have coming up is the funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security. I, in good conscience, could not support it today because ICE is under that. Now, will we be able to redirect some of this funding? That's got to be our focus. Will we be able to reduce some of that funding? They certainly can't get any more money, right? They gave themselves a ton while cutting healthcare in the big ugly law. And then in this appropriations process, they should not get more. And we should rein them in. And we should see if we can drive policy through the process. Things like body cameras. Every ICE official should have a body camera on them. Every single one of them should be banned from chokeholds. Every single one of them should be held to the standards that most law enforcement are held to. None of this broad immunity conversation. So we should drive in that process, and it's a process, frankly, that has been one of potential power for Democrats, because appropriations means keeping the government going, means keeping government agencies running. And so we need to exert our leverage. And you're going to see that conversation happen more and pick up over the next 2 weeks, because we have a deadline on January 30th.
Right.
It's interesting. I saw a poll yesterday or today that really, I think, captured how the public wins on this issue are changing. The president right now has a 40% approval rating on this issue of immigration. This poll from Axios or Reuters was showing it's down from 50% at the start of the year. So that's a pretty significant shift on what is really this president's fastball when it comes to policy. And so I'm curious, if Democrats take the House and the Senate in 2026, what are the things that you think Democrats should do? Obviously, it starts with this bill to call for the impeachment of Kristi Noem. What are those next steps, assuming Democrats take control of one or two of these houses?
Well, on the topic of immigration, look, I think Democrats did not sufficiently address it under the Biden administration. Look, I was there. I'll tell you, I feel like as a senior White House official, there's probably more we could have done to address the real concerns, both in fact and in perception, with regard to addressing the larger comprehensive immigration solution that we need. We got to pull people out of the shadows. We've got to put people on a pathway towards citizenship, but no one wants to feel like that the floodgates are open, right? Which is a misnomer. It's inaccurate, but that set into the public mindset. And so I think you have to accept that that we can't really revert to the messaging and the policy strategy of the past, that we should have a system of laws, a system of process, a system of order. But we are Americans, and one of our greatest strengths and attributes is the contributions from those from across this world. I'm the son of two West African immigrants, my dad from Ghana, my mom from Liberia, and now their son serves in the United States Congress working for the 550,000 people of Rhode Island's 1st Congressional District. That story is possible because America has a big heart and has great compassion. That said, we also need to do everything we can to balance the law enforcement side with the adjudication process, hiring immigration judges, getting people are orderly through, dealing with asylum claims. There are lots of parts of the world that are in great tumult. People with temporary protective status from Venezuela, from Haiti, and so many other places. So again, dealing with some of those challenge spots in the world also matters. But then we have to talk about what we're going to undo. Right, so we've got to talk about the affirmative, and then we've got to talk about what we want to undo and what a positive vision is. I'll tell you this: masked men with guns on the streets, who are not operating as if they are accountable or responsible to any single entity, that's got to end. That's got to end. We didn't need these people out there, right? And so that's something that I would say first and foremost. And then I think we've got to right size the agency, right? Again, every dollar that we spend towards this, and for a lot of people it comes to dollars and cents, we are not making parts of government work. Right? When Elon Musk slashed jobs at the Social Security Administration to make the seniors in my district have a difficult time calling for help with their Social Security earned benefit, That's the dollar we took from ICE. When they slash money from the IRS, where they should be going after the tax sheets, right? Many of those tax sheets happen to work next door to the Treasury Department in the White House. But, that is money that could be going to making our country better. So again, if we want to talk about resource allocation, that's an important thing because that comes up often. So we got to set a vision for what we would do with those resources, what the better and higher use of those resources, and still be a nation of laws, and still have compassion, and still be the best version of ourselves. Those are all possible. And if you look at that polling, Michael, that you referred to, by and large, people don't think the president is handling this particular situation in Minnesota well. They don't think the campaign of mass deportation is going well. He is on his top issue. If he is barely above water, that's indicative of mass disapproval. And the polling is fairly consistent on this. People did want some additional immigration enforcement. They didn't ask. They wanted a scalpel, right? They didn't want a hammer.
Yeah.
And this is a result of the overzealous actions of folks like Stephen Miller, who only have an agenda of making America a small place. And I say small intentionally, small-minded, small in terms of the pool of people who are included in the definition of America, and small in the type of opportunities that are provided in this country.
Yeah. Well, to shift gears to another traumatic subject of gun violence, unfortunately, you experienced one of these acts of gun violence in your district at Brown University in December. And I have a lot of friends who live in Providence, and they were describing the obvious terror of it, but then also the confusion around what was happening in the days after. My first question is really just, how did that, you're from this area, this has been your home forever. And people always say that thing with gun violence. I feel like we're like, you don't think it's going to happen to you until it does. So how, just on a personal level and then on a political level as well, how did that affect you, especially with your history of, you've worked in a lot of gun violence initiatives in the past?
Yeah, unfortunately, Providence can now be added to the list. Brown University can be added to the list that nobody wants to be on. Yeah, it's tough because as you said, I grew up there. I live very close to campus. Probably as on it as a lot of the students, and went to high school a couple blocks up at a place called Moses Brown. Fun fact: the cousin of or the uncle of Nicholas Brown, after whom Brown is named, is Moses. So that school up the road anyway.
Some Rhode Island trivia for you.
Some Rhode Island trivia. And so, I was very close to home. I got home very quickly after. I called the mayor, who's a good friend of mine. I've worked with them for almost 20 years now. And my heart sunk because it doesn't feel real. And I immediately thought about those students. I thought about the students across the campus. I thought about the community, because the way that Brown's campus is, it's very integrated with the community. And in fact, where that tragic incident took place is sort of a sort of border of the campus lines, and is almost, immediately next to the houses of people that I know very well. And I thought about the terror and trauma that those young people were going through at that particular moment. And, I feared for them. And because we did not know immediately where the assailant was, it inspired fear throughout the whole community. And Rhode Island is such a tight-knit place, so interwoven together. Everybody knows everybody. And so, especially now as a member of Congress, and because I've had a lot of opportunities across the country, I had my texts were blowing up. I still have texts from that weekend that I haven't even responded to yet. That's how deep it was. And so, it's the 1 month anniversary of that was this past week. Students will be back on campus on, I think they start classes on Tuesday or Wednesday of next week. And I know they're going to go with heavy hearts, certainly for the loss of 2 community members, 2 young lives in young Ella and Muhammad Aziz, and then 9 other students who were wounded. I think about them quite often because, for the students who lost their lives, they had an on-ramp to doing impactful things in the world, coming from a great institution like that, coming from great families. And if you read about them, you'll see that. Ella was a leader in the Young Republicans. Muhammad Aziz was a very a thoughtful student and wanted to help his family. And the 9 others are going to go to a campus that will never look the same. And for those who are around it, whether you were in a building or whether you're already back home, you're coming back to something different. And that is the measure of these incidents and the gun violence, is the delta between what was and what will be. And it is that pain and process, right? Because it's an evolving thing. At the White House, I was the Deputy Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, work with mayors across the country. And so in the Biden administration, I remember being the first person to call a mayor, a county official, a local official after an incident. Wow. And I can, rattle off Highland Park, Uvalde, Buffalo, so many of these that are seared in my brain. And the healing is something that's going to take years and years and years. Many folks, this is ongoing for a long time, and that'll be the same, unfortunately, for so many people. Because I'll tell you, the nature of these incidents is that you can change policies, procedures, practice, and they have. Brown is working overtime. The mayor of Providence, the governor of Rhode Island, overtime to make sure that we can prevent the next one. The challenge here is there is sort of no way to be totally safe emotionally.
Right.
And that's why I advise anybody who needs help after one of these things. And I know it can be so triggering. I spoke to several students who had been in other mass shootings that to seek help, to talk to people. This is, some PTSD level response that many students will have when they go back and encounter these spaces. Moreover, this is a generation slightly younger than us who all had mass shooter drills in school. I didn't have a mass shooter drill in school.
I know.
I wouldn't either.
It's
and
wild.
So that's a whole different mindset. So and some of the faculty remarked that they were so impressed with how the students knew how to barricade.
Wow.
What kind of commentary is that on America? And we are an outlier. It is not okay. And so status quo doesn't work. So I'll keep working at the things that to address gun violence. It may not be directly in response to this particular incident, but every single life lost, every single life affected is one that shouldn't be that way. And so we have to do everything we can as policymakers and as a public, right? The challenge is our memories are powerful as human beings. We can put things into boxes and move on. We should not move on.
We were just in Orlando, Florida, doing a project, and what I was so struck by was how many people the Pulse nightclub shooting was still a very real present memory. And I think that speaks to your point about, long after the news has moved on to the next thing, this tragedy still remains with these communities. And, I'm curious that you sharing how you were often the first call is pretty remarkable. What did you see from this current administration with regard to that interfacing with local officials, and what alarmed you with what seemed to be a real pretty disastrous communication from our FBI director and
Mhm.
that whole operation? What stood out to you about all that?
Well, I will say at the local level here in Rhode Island, professional, or here in Rhode Island, I'm in DC right now, but I'm always here in
Yeah.
Rhode
We
Island.
get
That's
it.
how
You're
I
always
am.
in Rhode
we get
Island.
it.
That's what I'm saying. You know it.
Yeah.
But
By
the
the way, Anna
profession-
is always in Rhode Island as
I'm
well.
There we
also
go.
always in
There
Rhode
we
Island.
go.
I'm with you. I'm with
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
But I would say the deprofessionalism of the officials at the local level, right? Providence was at the head of the table. You always have to have a point agency working very closely with our state police, a very well-regarded force, and the FBI Boston office, the local agents. They were supremely collaborative. Now, look, I think that stays a little bit in contrast to what we see out of the federal government, right? You have, on one hand, a FBI director who's got a lot of other things he cares about on a daily basis, whether it's private jets or going to UFC fights or seeing
Or
his
field
girlfriend
jacket
perform.
size.
Or the jacket size.
Right.
I think he's got a lot on his plate. But in all seriousness, the rush to judgment, the shooting from the hip, the demonstration of the lack of qualification to do a job where you're supposed to bring comfort to people. Ultimately, that's what public safety is about, right? It's making people feel better. And to frankly go too far out over your skis and create a situation where a traumatized community loses faith in those who are serving it, right? And so that's attributable to the FBI director. The FBI field agents, the folks on the ground, they did a remarkable job, and I have only heard good things about them. But I've asked for answers, so I've reached out. I want to hear in detail all the different steps along the way in partnership with our officials. What was the federal role? Right. And this is something we see all too often from this administration. We also had the president tweeting all sorts of mess, right, out there. And then you see the conspiracy theories go on the internet. This is what happens when you live in a state of being where the truth and transparency are sometimes optional for those in the highest of offices. You immediately saw the president start to attack the university, attack others. That's not the job. What happened to being the consoler in chief?
Right.
What happened to bringing people together, to seeking truth, light, answers, and bringing us to solutions? So that is what sometimes it can be so detrimental when you have short-sightedness, short-termism, and a lack of discipline. Right. And discipline is so vital. So ultimately, our community will heal. We will heal. I have an unabiding belief in the strength of community, because if you don't have enough energy, reach out for somebody and they'll share theirs with you. And that's what we do in a strong community. But we do need better examples out of this Trump administration, out of people who have fancy titles at three-letter agencies with jackets that might be too small.
Well, speaking of community, as I mentioned, I know quite a few of your constituents. And so I thought that I would reach out to some of them and see what they had any questions or thoughts. So I was talking to their congressman. And I asked one of my friends who lives in Newport what most excites him about your election. And he said that he is optimistic about your age within a party that is in need of new voices, and that he is, quote, relying on you to be an agent of change.
Whoa.
So how do you view your role in Congress and in your party, since you're part of the next generation of both of those?
Well, look, it's a big task. I don't come to this lightly. I didn't know that I would ever serve in office, right? I worked for 2 presidents. I worked for a governor. I was a behind the scenes guy. I'm like, let's make stuff work.
Yeah.
Executive branch. Like I came to a place where we talk a lot, right? And we deliberate a lot. And if you're lucky, you might get your thing passed one day. And so it was a change in speed. But when the opportunity opened up, my predecessor, a great leader, David Cicilline, he decided to take on a new mission. I looked in the mirror and I said, why not me? And I encourage everybody, wherever you are, to look in the mirror and ask yourself, why not me? And if you can't come up with a really good reason, then you should try. And that's how I ended up here. I wasn't, nobody thought I was going to win this election. I was running against 19 people. There were 12 on the ballot. 3/4 of them had held elected office at the time or previously. But I just went and told my story, a story where with hard work, grit, and resilience, people in my life made sure that I had a better tomorrow. So I got to do that for others. That's ultimately what I believe this is all about. Opportunity is what I'm fixated on. And so at 38 years old, I'm grateful to serve. I think I'm the 14th youngest in Congress, maybe 11th youngest Democrat, something like that. And, I don't feel that young. I'll tell you that. Because now when you have Maxwell Frost running around here, I got 10
just
years on that man.
Drumming in the hallway.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, can I be in your band? He's like, your music isn't really, contemporaneous with mine, but it's all good.
Do you play an instrument?
No, but I did sing in a cappella in high school.
Okay.
And was in a vocal group in college. I wasn't very good
your
either.
Instrument.
I am my instrument. Look, I do think I have a capacity to be part of change. I will say, seeing it up close, you got to define it. You have to figure out what your contribution is. And that's what I'm, doing, because look, you can sort of follow the wave of the day, what the hottest thing is online, be driven by slogans. And look, you can serve in the roles. But the things that I care most about are making sure that there are real government interventions in unlocking the people's pathways forward. So for me, I think about for the people I serve, the local economy a lot, right? I want to make sure more young Rhode Islanders decide that they can stay in Rhode Island, more barriers to them staying, whether it's the cost of childcare, whether it's our stagnant construction of new housing. We have a real big deficit of housing in our state, whether it's what we need to do to have a healthcare system that works, that gives people more of an opportunity to maximize the most important thing we have, which is our health. Those are real things. And so I try to stay anchored, no Rhode Island pun intended, around.
I see the flag behind you.
You see it. It's literally in the shot. It's so important for me to make it real and make it plain, right? Because government people like to talk about government things, but the people I work for are thinking about, how are you making my quality of life better? And in real ways, right? I have to make real why I was in a hearing this week on on environmental satellites coming out of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Why does that matter? Well, that's important data to save life and property because of the scourge of inaction on climate change, right? Like, I've got to make the work real. My work on foreign affairs, why I, am yelling about Donald Trump selling N200 or H200 chips, semiconductors to China, is because we have to win the AI race. And that is important to the future of jobs and the economy locally. So I have to break a lot of these things down, but also never forget that people want you to speak to them and the things that they're going through. And so, offshore wind, another one, why I talk about that is energy costs. We live in a high cost region. We need renewables. Wind and solar are cheap. They're replaced by more expensive fossil fuels. And if you raise the prices for all of these things, it will crowd out the other expenses that are important to us. So,
right.
So those are the things that drive me. Is just being fixated and focused on the people I work for.
I love that.
Lastly, before we let you go, we like to ask this question of everyone who comes on here. Who is somebody across the aisle who you would like to get a beer with? Whether it's somebody that you have a existing relationship with or somebody you've never met, but you think, hey, we can come together on policy on this one thing or whatever it may be. Is there anybody who stands out?
That's a great question. Well, look, there are actually a bunch of them. I would say right now, someone who I admire because he's very thoughtful, but we haven't gotten a beer yet, is a guy from Utah named Blake Moore.
Yeah.
And he's tall. And so as a 5'8", 5'9"-ish person, I try to limit the number of over 6 footers I hang out with.
Yeah, I got that.
But he's a family guy, and he often talks about it. We serve on the budget committee together. And he talks about actually fiscal discipline from the perspective of the future and what we're doing for our kids. And he serves on the Ways and Means Committee, a really powerful committee in here. And he's in there leadership on the other side, but he's always reasonable. This week, I heard him speak about, kind of the wrong direction that President Trump was taking us in via his desires for Greenland and acquiring Greenland. And so, thoughtfulness and ability to speak truth and being affable, right? Like, sometimes, one of the things that you pick up in Congress is that, and sometimes Congress is a little like high school. Everybody's a little bit different.
Seems like it, yeah.
And like high school, there's a lot of like, hormonal stuff happening. And so everybody's a little moody sometimes. And not everybody's just like, cheery and friendly and all of that. And that's okay. Everybody has their day and we're working on the serious things. But he's a person who is very consistently, hey, how you doing, man? Well, like that sort of nature. And as a Rhode Islander, like we're friendly people. And so, and Utah seems like a friendly place too.
Yeah, I love that. Love that answer.
Yeah.
We're gonna follow up and see if you guys end up getting that drink.
Yeah. All right. Please do.
Well,
All
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. We're so grateful to have you here and talk at this very important moment in time. So we really, really appreciate your insight.
Well, I hope this was the best happy hour you've ever had.
It was the best happy hour at noon that I've ever had in my life.
All right. Take care, y'all.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.